and welcome to Conversations in Horror, everyone. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to our podcast in which we delve deep into individual horror films with me as the main host. And then, of course, I have a special guest, different special guest every week, and we just kind of discuss these films in a candid conversation to kind of get to the meat and potatoes of some of the horror films out there. Sometimes they are really celebrated films. Sometimes they're not so celebrated, and sometimes they've been completely forgotten altogether. The film we're going to be talking about today, which is part of our Aquatic Horror Month, is a film that probably has been more forgotten than remembered. But we're hoping to kind of help people remember some of the glory days of the 80s. So tonight we're going to be talking about the movie Death Ship, starring Richard Crenna and oh my God, I can't remember. George Kennedy. Thank you. Thank you, Dave Watkins. Dave Watkins is here to join us on this conversation today. And George Kennedy, I feel like went a complete blank on his name for some reason. So this is Death Ship, starring George Kennedy as our main star and Richard Crenna. And it's an unusual film, and that I'll preface it with this: is that I watched this a lot as a kid, and then throughout, I guess, after college or something, I completely forgot about the film. Completely forgot about the film until it kind of resurfaced a year or two ago in my consciousness, and I rewatched it. So, first of all, Dave, I'm sure you have a different experience with this film, but tell us a little bit about your experience with watching this movie.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember the exact circumstances. I'm pretty sure I saw it on TV, and I remember somebody whoever I was trying to watch it with did not like it. They thought it was pretty bad, but I was kind of digging, like, the setup especially is very very well done, and this is a 1980 film, and pretty decent budget for what it is, and it's pretty impressive that it does have those actors in it, like George Kennedy and Richard Crenna. At the time, I recognized George Kennedy from the Naked Gun movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, apparently he did a lot of horror movies, a lot of B horror movies, but he's a really great actor anyway. He won a Best Supporting Actor award for The Cool Hand Luke. You ever see that?
Yes, I have seen that. I
He's
love
really
that
good
movie.
in it too.
George
Yeah.
Kennedy did a lot of B horror movies, as did Richard Crenna did his fair share of B movies as well. And when I
You-
saw the movie, when I first saw the movie, I was aware of both of who they were because I'd seen so many of the B movies that they had been in, and of course I was a huge fan of the Rambo films, which Richard Crenna was a co-star for. So I was really
right.
familiar with him.
It's funny, like most people know Richard Crenna from that. I know him from was it Summer Rental with John Candy. You ever see that?
Yes, I have seen.
Yeah. That's how I recognized him when I saw this film. I didn't really watch that much Rambo for some reason, but I watched it later, but not like wasn't one of the ones that I wasn't a go-to for me for quite some time. But it actually is pretty good, really, a pretty good series.
I was fortunately my father was huge into action films, and so I actually saw like Rambo 3 at the theater, and Rambo 2 and First Blood were like constant rewatches in our family house between me, my brother, and my father. So
Well,
I knew Richard Crenna mostly
yeah,
from those
from
originally.
that first Rambo is pretty. It's a lot different than the other two. The other two they went like a little for the action. The first one is pretty serious. It's actually almost like a crime drama film in a way about post-traumatic stress. So it's weird. I mean, it's good. I like the other two are more entertaining. The first one's a better film. It was actually really supposed to be only one film. You're supposed to die at the end of it, and that's it.
Well, it's good. Good he didn't, because we ended up with 5 movies in the franchise, dude. Which is
Yeah.
not to say the same for Death Ship, since there was only one of these actually made, despite the fact that they left it off in which you can actually do sequels.
Right, and this is so. As far as the plot of this thing, so these people are on a cruise ship. George Kennedy's the captain. He's retiring, and Richard Crenna is supposed to be taking his place, and he's not real. He seems to be. He's gotten forced into this retirement, so that's kind of an important plot point for his character. Even because there's not like a lot to his character other than that eventually, because he becomes possessed by the death ship. but
Hmm.
the death ship actually comes and rams into the cruise ship, and then the survivors from the cruise ship end up on the death ship, and then it's a you want to tell them what the death ship actually is?
Well,
Or
the
should
Death
we
Ship
see?
is like this movie essentially is a haunted house on a ship movie, pretty much. Some of the great reveals of it, and I had forgotten some of this because it's been a while since I watched it. Really, is the fact that this used to be a German boat of some kind. I don't think they ever revealed the actual name of the ship,
They do
the Ghost Ship.
but yeah, not just German. There's Nazis. You have
Yeah,
Nazi paraphernalia, yeah, on it.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, part of the plot is that it's not just Germans, but it's also a Nazi ship. Because George Kennedy and I forget well, not George Kennedy, but actually George Kennedy does start off in that scene where they actually walk into the room filled with all the Nazi paraphernalia and the picture of Hitler.
Oh
But
yeah,
it's the Nick and the Marshall character. Marshall is who Richard Crenna plays, and he's the second in command. They stumble upon this room halfway through the movie, or more than halfway through the movie, and it's filled with nothing but Nazi paraphernalia. And then the Nazi story starts to pop up. Until then, it's really strictly like a ghost story. These survivors from the ocean liner, this cruise ocean liner, are just slowly encountering these mechanisms in which the ship is acting on its own. And they don't know why, because that's part of the big reveal. They don't know why. And one by one, it's like a slasher movie. One person gets killed while they're away from the rest of the crew, and then another person gets killed. And it's a slow build to the final act when all hell breaks loose and everything is finally revealed. I had forgotten a lot about that because I kept thinking it was more or less a ghost story haunted house
yeah,
on a ship until
yes,
I realized all the Nazi stuff.
yeah, right. Well, what the weird thing about the film, which is actually fairly interesting, is the ship for the most part is doing it, and
Hmm.
and that was something like for some reason there's a few other similar films to this, like was it this death ship, a ghost ship, and there's also the ghost galleon. You ever seen that? Like the
Hmm.
blind dead, yeah. So both of those have like actual ghost on them or blind dead on the other. So I thought there was some kind of monster involved here, but it's really the ship itself is the ship is possessed, and it actually can
Hmm.
possess people. And those are really but the ship, it does most of what's going on. The ship is doing it itself.
Yeah. So that's the interesting thing I found about the film is that from the one of the very first frames is the first thing you see is the ghost ship. And it's cutting back and forth between the ocean liner and the ghost ship and the interior of the ghost ship in the engine room where everything's working perfectly fine. Now, this is
They cut
this
to
is
that engine room like 20 times during the film.
they do. It's always moving, it's always working.
Yeah.
It's crystal clean. It's like and that's the one thing I did. There's like two rooms in this entire thing that feel like they're 40 plus years old, and the rest of it feels very clean. Which is
Yeah.
so odd to me.
Well,
But go ahead.
some of that set design is pretty cool. The boat
Mhm.
itself looks really awesome. It looks really creepy when you see that, and the way it's all black. And you're right though. It does seem there are some rooms that look like they should because when they start going onto the boat, it looks very uninviting for quite
Mhm.
some time. But then there are some rooms that look more clean than they should.
Yeah, like the movie, the movie room when they watch the movies is like this crystal clean movie room where they get to watch the movie. And
Right.
and actually, I've forgotten that was a pertinent part of the plot when the Nick character more or less gets inundated with all the Nazi footage, and that I actually like that. Now, see what when this in the '80s. So in the
Yeah.
'80s when this came out, I would have had no clue about all this Nazi stuff when I watched this film, and I saw it in the '80s, not when it came out
Yeah.
necessarily, but I saw it
Yeah.
in the '80s, and
I feel
maybe
like yeah. Yeah, I feel like maybe it went over my head the first time too.
yeah.
I feel like that. Sure. And
Um,
it's not revealed till later into it anyway, but
mhm.
it doesn't really matter that much where I mean, it could come from Nazis, it could come from some evil, whatever it is. It's something on the boat I mean, it makes more sense for it to be the Nazis, but or but really, like, could have been any evil on the boat that possesses people, and the ship wants death and it wants victims, and that's what its primary goal is.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right.
I'll agree with you on that. Because until the point where the George Kennedy character, what's his name? Ashland, Captain
Yeah, yeah.
Ashland, is completely possessed by the ship. He's when he is completely possessed, he is sprouting out the boat needs the ship needs blood. It needs your blood, it needs your family's blood. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
okay, that's how it runs. Which
He
is interesting because
yeah.
earlier in the film, Nick and Trevor Marshall, which is, like I said, Crenna's character, ask, "What is this ship running on? It shouldn't be running."
Right, yeah. Yeah,
You
because it's
know?
just running out there by itself, and it's there's a lot. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of questions like that in general. But it's interesting the way that it also reminds me of The Shining a little bit with the possession of George Kennedy's character, but it happens fairly quick. It does
Hmm.
happen pretty quick in the Jack Nicholson version of The Shining as well. But he so after the shipwreck, he they is what the weird thing is with there's a lot of weird stuff that I thought may be going in a different direction. But like, for instance, they're on the life raft. George Kennedy's character, the Captain Ashland's not on there,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden they see something in the water, and it comes up and it's him, and it's like, why was he under the water and why is he alive? So there's like weird stuff like that happens, and then he's all out of it, like he can hardly move for a long time, and they have to get him on the ship, and they actually have a stunt double that looks nothing like him when they're getting him onto the ship. It's like he's like half the size of George Kennedy, and he has like a really hilarious looking wig on that looks nothing like his hair. Did you notice that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
On this watch, I did.
yeah.
I did.
And then they finally get him on there, and then when they put him to bed, he's laying there, and then when he does wake up, he actually accidentally kills somebody because he's seeing shit.
Yeah, he's seeing shit. And then after that point, he is completely possessed.
Yeah,
So, for anyone who has never seen Death Ship, essentially once the survivors from the ocean line get on the Death Ship, for a while there they're just exploring the Death Ship, looking for survivors, looking for food, trying to survive, that type of thing. They think they've been saved, and then slowly but surely things start happening that they can't explain. Um, and eventually, the I think, what's her name? The first one who dies. The Not the first one. He the comedian.
yeah. The Saul Rubinek is
Saul
Jackie.
Rubinek, who I didn't know
Yeah,
was in the movie until I rewatched. It's like, oh, that's Saul Rubinek.
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
oh,
I remembered him being in. I didn't remember him dying so early though. But yeah,
yeah. So I when I was watching his whole sequence, I kind of felt like this is how the Final Destination movies came up with the unseen death, who's controlling everything around to make to manipulate people in their new deaths. And so
right,
you,
right.
you see that with his character, who gets more or less hung upside down by the ship. So you're watching the ship. The ship
Yeah,
kills all these people up until when George Kennedy kills somebody. It is the ship manipulating everything to kill people,
right,
which I thought was
right.
very interesting. You're not seeing the spirits of ghosts or any of that stuff. Like you said before, it is literally the ship. And
Yeah,
I like they keep it that way throughout the whole film, except for with George Kennedy's crazy possessed character.
yeah. But the
Uh,
ship still continues to kill people. The ship actually
mhm.
kills most of them. Even like the lady that George Kennedy kills earlier on, she eats some peppermints, and all of a sudden her face gets all jacked up looking. But that's a concern too. There's no food on this ship, so they even being on it for too long, it's not going to work out too good for them. If they eat anything, they turn into like I don't even know what was going on with her. She was like all messed up though.
It
But
was contaminated with something. We
yeah,
don't know
yeah, yeah.
what, and we're never told. But she's contaminated with something.
But I,
And she died.
yeah,
Oh no.
one thing, yeah, 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 he kills her. But one thing I thought was odd, and it almost seemed like it could have been like a different type of plot twist going on with these survivors, because there's a lot of people on that cruise ship, and when the cruise ship goes down, and there's only it seems to be only one raft left, and
Mhm.
it just happens to have all the main characters and their families on the raft. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, and it's well, it's really like the main character, Richard Crenna, is really the main character, and his
Mm.
wife and his kids, they're all fine. And then one of the other crew members and his girlfriend just happened to be there, and then the George Kennedy, and then another couple of random people. But it's like that's all that survived from the ship. That many people on there, and so it almost seemed like it was it could have been like they're already dead sort of movie, which I always thought that might be how where it was leading towards, you know.
Purgatory, and they get stuck on a death ship while in purgatory, which
Right.
which would have worked if we don't show the helicopter picking them up at the very
Yeah,
end. They just saw them
right,
floating. If they just, that would have been a more depressing ending, actually.
right. I mean, yeah, I mean, it does seem like it's kind of leading towards something that might have been, you know, more more, fascinating, I guess, or more provoking. But but yeah, but even like, say earlier on when before that even happens, when the death ship hits the other ship, it's you see that already earlier on. So, it might be hard for that twist still to work, but.
Getting back to our George Kennedy character, because you started off mentioning some of the aspects that make his character works with the story and the Nazi story, is that the fact that he's being forced in retirement, which we don't really realize so much later. When him and Richard Crenna's character have like a face off,
Right.
their confrontation. Essentially, we are led to believe that George Kennedy's Captain Ashland is just retiring, and Richard Crenna's Marshall is supposed to be taking over. And you think it's amicable until he becomes possessed by the ship Ashland, and he wants that ship to be his ship now, or it's always been his ship, depending on how you look at it.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like he's always been a ship like The Shining. Actually, The Shining probably came out like a few years before this, so it definitely had some Shining stuff going on in it.
I will not disagree with that. Now that you mentioned that, I will agree with you that I do think there is some of that shining going on, because that was a popular movie and they probably wanted to add a little bit of more flavor to this film. But I liked watching George Kennedy slowly go nuts. A lot of the
Yeah,
times you don't get to watch him go nuts and crazy in movies. He usually is the normal guy, and he gets killed, or
yeah,
he's in horror movies, which he's done a ton of horror movies. He always gets killed early. He's like the character
yeah,
actor who gets killed early despite
yes,
his
yeah, so yeah,
background.
yeah. Some of the films he gets like top billing, and he's in the movie for like 10 minutes or something. So they just
He
showed
was
up
an
for two
early
days.
he was an early version of Lance Henriksen
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
it's just
in the movies that he was
yeah,
in.
yeah, right.
But with this one, he does. You when you mentioned The Shining, I didn't think about that until you mentioned it. He does de-evolve in that whole Shining aspect. He goes completely nuts
Yeah,
slash possessed, and starts talking to the ship as though it is his crew and everything like that, and it should be responding to whatever he says. Um, One of the questions that
yeah,
is not asked in the film is whatever happened to all the Germans. We already know what happens to the people that the Germans I guess torture in the film, but we never really learned what happened to the Germans who were servicing this
yeah,
ship, which is an interesting question to ask.
yeah. I would think that. I mean, just guessing, I would think the ship killed them too. But yeah, it does say, there was a part earlier on when George Kennedy's becoming possessed, he starts seeing another captain in black up top,
Hmm.
like calling to him. That's like really the only time you see anything that's kind of like maybe a ghost or something to that nature. But it's all hallucinations on by his character's part, I think. But from the ship doing it, obviously.
Yeah. Now, you bring up one of the other questions I want to ask you actually about this film, is because this film has a lot of those intercuts of scenes that are supposed to be foretelling of events to come
Oh
later,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
or is cuts to other people or scenes, but they never actually match what you're actually watching. Like when they're cutting back and forth between George Kennedy's character and things that he's supposedly seeing of the future. I want to ask whether or not you think that's stuff that he's seeing, or is that just stuff that's cut in between the footage to give hints to the audience? because George Kennedy's character never responds or reacts to any of these flashes, so to speak. The only time he ever does is when he sees the soldier that he's strangling the first woman with. Shit, I can't remember her name,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
The
that's
the lady who ate the peppermint stuff.
yeah, to the lady who ate the peppermints. She's
Yeah,
the only one where you actually see like he thinks he's killing, strangling another soldier. The
right,
rest of the film, these little intercuts just there, and it's not just with his characters, with several other characters. I
right.
think it's
Yeah. I think with this, I think there's a lot of ideas in this film that don't quite pan out a bit.
yeah.
I mean, it's some interesting. I know what you mean though. Like for instance, like he sees the vision of the one lady gets killed in the shower, like the blood comes out
Hmm.
of the shower, which goes on forever, and it's kind of like a rip off of Psycho. But it's not even like she's not even really like what is it doing to her? I don't know. But and then he throws her into the water after she's dead. I guess he may have killed her too. It doesn't show. But the thing is, like he sees like the vision of that before it happens, and he
Uh,
sees the reaction of the other guy of looking at it, looking like he's looking at it, but it's actually a reaction to him looking at the movie that happens later. So I guess it's a pretty convenient thing for the director to cut in since he already shot those scenes and he can just put them in there. You know?
that's sort of the impression I got, is that they had all this stuff cut, and then they wanted to add little
Yeah.
flashes within the movie as it goes along of stuff that's impending. Like you see, so the woman who gets covered has the shower of blood is Lori, who is having sort of a relationship with Nick, who's the other character from the ship. He works with the ship. He works with Marshall's character, and they're having a relationship. And before this whole possession, their relationship wasn't very serious. And literally, after he asked her to marry him, and they got real serious for the first time, she goes in the shower to take a shower before they have
Yeah.
they have sex, and she has a shower scene in blood, and she becomes so traumatized, which is hard to believe. Even
Yeah.
I think I think it was maybe effective in the '80s, but she was so traumatized by just the shower of blood that she just
Right.
breaks down completely,
Yeah.
enough for Captain Ashland to come in here and take her
Yeah.
and lift her over his head and throw her off the ship.
Yeah. But I think though I think she was dead before he threw her off the ship.
Do you
But
think she? I don't think
I don't know. I mean, she wasn't moving, but she could have just
she
been
wasn't
passed
moving.
out. She could have just been passed out. But he that's pretty crazy. He just throws her off the ship like that. But she's also locked in to the shower. The blood on
Yeah.
top of the blood, she can't get out, so she's panics. And I mean, I guess like being cooped up and I don't know, but the ship can. I don't know. It's pretty not it doesn't quite work for me. There's something lacking of that. I've seen this done in other films that after this that were done a lot better, where they were in the shower fills up and
Uh,
drowns them or something like that. But but this is 1980 and that so whoever did that, I don't even remember what that was in, but whoever did that, had had this to see and say, hey, you know what would be better if we just filled this whole thing up and drowned her,
well,
But
yeah,
also,
and
I don't know, something more though. It's something more. It's like they're so happy they got that shot of her in the shower. They show it like for so long.
see, so that's what I was about to say. They show it for so
Yeah,
long, and
yeah,
they're cutting back and forth between other characters, and she's
yeah.
still in the shower.
Yeah, it's so yeah, because it shows like the other scenes between it, and it's like I mean, not just like it would go back and show like a scene, and then come back to the shower, and then cut back to see another scene, and then cut back to the shower, and
Uh-huh.
it's like we really only needed like the shower one time. It's instead of like show, you should have had all those other scenes before the shower scene, and then have the shower scene, and then go forward with it instead of like cutting back and forth. It's just
Well, they had to show Nick running from the point where he can't get her out, running through corridor after corridor after corridor after corridor after corridor after corridor just to get
yeah,
to Marshall's room to finally get his help, and then have to
yeah,
run all the way back. Now it's funny because you're thinking, if they're why is their room so far away from their room? It's only literally should be three rooms being used, and their
yeah,
room is corridor after corridor after corridor
yeah.
away from. I only noticed this time watching it because that you're right. The shower scene went on for so long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be a psychological thing with the ship tricking his mind into thinking that the ship's bigger than it really is. I mean, there's
Well,
always that type of thing. But I don't. I like to say there's a lot of really creative ideas in this film, but they don't really. They don't. I guess they don't settle. They don't settle on the rules, and they keep kind of changing the rules a little bit. I don't think they. I think they were just kind of playing with stuff. And it's possible they had ideas about them all being in purgatory that they maybe
dropped him.
dropped it. Maybe someone else was reading the script and was like, "No, that sucks." You gotta have them safe with a helicopter at the end. Say it's
It,
never
you
gonna fly.
you're right because it's an '80s movie, and I would say it'd be different if it was a '90s or early 2000s movies where people were getting away with being not so clear cut with their endings, and they could be a little bit more risque with them. But this is the '80s, and if I remember correctly, a lot of these films tend to have, as crazy as they were, would have some type of hope at the end of the film. I was trying to remember the movie with Richard Crenna and the Hounds from Hell, or Devil Dog, the Hounds from
Devil
Hell.
Dog, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I saw a lot of these movies when I was young. I don't remember much
yeah,
of the movie, but you tend to have these movies where they have a happier ending to say, "Oh, you guys went through hell, so we're gonna give you a little
right,
happier ending." And you didn't have all these ambiguous endings back then, and this is early '80s, so it's kind
yeah.
of weird. I think it fits, but
The happy ending or the shitty ending.
I think it fits with them being saved. But the thing is, overall, I think with the fact that I actually like the parts where it is more of the ship doing everything and not so much George Kennedy, because the point George Kennedy becomes like a physical villain, I think it loses something, especially when Richard Crenna thinks that by stabbing him in like the stomach area with either a knife or a fork or whatever he stabs him with,
Yeah,
and he's just gonna go down and die, and that will be the end of him. I find that
yeah,
hilarious because you see George Kennedy with a little bitty blood spot where
yeah,
he
yeah,
gets stabbed, and that's it. I was like, and you thought
yeah.
he was dead?
Yeah. But there's like some weird, really odd stuff happens around that same time point, that same point of the film. It's like some really like weird editing. Like for instance, they're in that room watching the Nazi film, like
Nazi.
both Krenna's character and the other guy, the Nick character. And next thing you know, Nick is completely in a different room outside of the ship, and then George
Hmm.
Kennedy like throws him into a net or something and drowns him. But it's like really jumpy cuts. It's like almost like something happened with the editing that they had to cut it shorter or something must have happened. And then that scene where you're talking about him all of a sudden stabbing George Kennedy, there's all of a sudden there's a scene of him talking to George Kennedy out of nowhere, like they're just sitting down having a conversation. There's no lead up to it. It's just all of a sudden they're just in there having the conversation. Like
Hmm.
something's missing. Like maybe they weren't able to shoot everything or they had to cut it just for like the length of the film. But it's just some really jumpy stuff that happens in that part of the film.
Yeah, it is, and I never noticed it until I rewatched it because I'm older now.
Yeah,
It's been a while since I've watched it.
yeah, yeah. I kind of probably may have noticed it before, but because it's just like doesn't quite connect in an odd way, But I don't know. But maybe it's trying to disorient you or something. But I really think there was something happened in post or while they were shooting it, and why they had to edit it the way that they did,
Well,
is what
yeah,
I
because
think.
it makes the movie seem a little odd when characters can be thrown from one location to another without any rhyme or reason. I mean, he, he they were trapped in that room, the Nick and Marshall, and this is after Nick is like being inundated with all the propaganda stuff and all the auditory hallucinations and everything like that, and he just goes crazy through all that type stuff. So that when he gets thrown into the cargo net and the cargo hold by Captain Ashland, and he sees all the bodies in the net, which we've actually seen some of those earlier in the film. being cut back and forth between for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it seems like the film was foretelling the audience that this is going to happen, but then Nick's character is like completely just gone. He's
Yeah.
like terrified. It's to the fact where all George Kennedy's character has to do is close up the cargo net, and Nick is just
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
done, and then
Yeah.
drops the cargo net into the water, and he just slowly drowns, forgetting about himself.
Yeah. Like, yeah, he could have gotten out of it. It's just
He
like,
could have, and I
okay.
think that's part of what the film is trying to say. But it's trying the film is the ship is breaking down the psychological barriers for these characters, but it doesn't do it for all the characters. It just does it for a couple of them, and then for
Yeah.
other characters like the Saul Rubinek character and the woman who eats the peppermints, it's completely different.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He just kills them.
Yeah,
Yeah. Some of them, it just kills them. And I don't, yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying about the rules. The rules don't
the
seem
rules.
off, and I don't quite understand what they are. I get it that the chip wants to kill people, but then it's like, I mean, it's actually okay if, but as far as the ship wanting to kill people, and it also wants to torture people, and it wants to psychologically torture them. Maybe it gets more from the psychological torture, but it's not said in the movie, and it just seems a little random.
Hmm.
And I think like sometimes the cuts you're talking about when it cuts to something that looks cool or grotesque for no reason, maybe it's like maybe they thought that maybe it was dragging or going too slow, so like maybe
Hmm.
throw some cool looking stuff in there, and people will be like, okay, cool, that's gonna happen later in the film. I can't wait to watch that scene.
No, I think that 100%. I think that there are some. I think when they did test audiences, it probably was a film that went off a little bit slower and not enough happened, I guess. And they wanted to show some more grotesque scenes because some of the scenes of people dying aren't really grotesque. You
Yeah, right.
know,
Yeah,
you don't see any of the dead bodies in those scenes, early scenes. The Saul Rubinek getting killed, he just gets hoisted up and dropped in the water and
right.
drowns, or
Yeah,
he gets loose and then runs along the side of the ship until he drowns, um, and then the other woman eats the peppermints and gets strangled. Uh,
right.
those more graphic ones come towards the end, you know.
Yeah, but
So showing those early kind
yeah,
of puts the audience in a mood to know that there's hopefully a payoff, you know.
yeah, yeah. Which Yeah, I think it's such an odd thing, but I mean, I think to me like the build up of the suspense of it works really good without all that.
Hmm.
Obviously, they wanted to show some stuff, but I mean, it's pretty creepy getting on this ship that you don't know where you're at and trying to figure
Hmm.
out what's going on it. It's a pretty creepy idea, and I just think the execution's a little off in general with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The first two-thirds of it, when they're trying to figure out the small details of the ship, you're getting these small little details about what may or may not have happened. They go into I forget what I think it's the wheelhouse, and they look at all the charts, and the ship is just going in big circles. It has been repeating these circles and stuff over and over and over again, or these small
Yeah,
little details makes it
yeah,
the mystery much more interesting, and then of course it becomes a possession movie. Now,
yeah,
unfortunately, that's something that gets used a lot in the movies where there has to be some type of physical villain. And I guess George Kennedy made a great villain.
yeah.
But also Nazis make a great villain, and then
Right.
we
Yeah,
throw in
yeah,
all the Nazi stuff.
yeah,
I don't know if all of the Nazis using the ship as a torture ship and all that actually helps or hurts the story. Because my biggest thing is this: if Nazis were doing all this, then who's possessing the ship? If it was victims, they probably wouldn't. Ghost of the victims probably wouldn't act like this. But
yeah.
if they're Germans, dead, the ghost of dead Germans, they probably would. But then what happened to them to begin with?
Right. Yeah. I guess it'd be hard to explain, but it's got to be the Germans or even I guess I don't even know if it's necessarily supposed to be that. I think it's just like the ship itself got developed a taste for blood because of what the Germans were doing on. The ship itself is actually possessed or more of a created thing that might be from all the torture and death and
Well, see, those are the questions that,
yeah,
that the film asks, gives you more questions as it starts to answer other questions. I think that's the problem. It starts to answer some questions, but
yeah,
it gives you more questions after they've answered some. And I think that's where some of the
yeah,
confusion or some of the issues that might be. Or it could just be a film that wants to just leave an open book for a lot of stuff if they were
yeah.
thinking about developing a sequel.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the case, but maybe. But
I don't
that,
know either.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
early 80s. It's the
right,
80s, 1980s. Who knows if they were thinking that early about doing sequels?
right. Yeah, I don't, I don't know if they were. I mean, I don't feel like they thought it was going to be a sequel. I don't ever get the feeling for that when I'm watching it, but I mean, it could be done. I do like I say, I do like the setting. I like the setup. I like
Mm.
the George Kennedy and Richard Crenna are really great actors, and it's cool seeing them in a B horror movie like that. It's always nice to see that, so, and
So,
and unlike sometimes like you see like I was talking about before, like on another conversation with you that you see like a really like a really good A-list actor in the film, it's probably not going to be that much of a horror film, where this one is though.
mhm. So that brings up my next thing I want to talk about. One of the things about this film is it has a great cast to it, and I think the cast does a really good job with the material itself. They're actually, especially Richard Crenna, George Kennedy just chews scenery like I don't know what. He's so great at doing that. He's great at being the possessed captain who now is the captain of a ghost ship.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And Richard Crenna, as usual, I kind of see him as the exact same type of character in all the movies I watch him in, which is kind of sad to say, which is also good because he's such a dependable actor. But he never goes, in my opinion, never goes above and beyond as some of his performances. They're all solid, but
yeah,
they're not things you remember. Not even in the Rambo series. That he's kind of like the third build type of character. Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, and even though he takes, probably second billing in this, I think it's George Kennedy and then him. His is a very subdued character. Really, I mean, he gets his ass whooped by
yeah.
George Kennedy in the last act.
I like the beard though. He's kind of an interesting look for him with the beard like he has on. 'Cause you
Hmm.
don't like most other films like Rambo and all that. He doesn't have that.
Clean cut.
But I think he kind of because of the character that he's playing, I think he kind of had to play it straighter like that
Hmm.
because he is like the hero character of the film,
Hmm.
and so he couldn't really do much with the character. I don't think the script leans more to give him anything to do other than what he did.
I agree. I think Nick is the more go getter, and he gets to do a lot more of the physical stuff. The boat even tries to get rid of him early on, and of course he has the great scene in the cargo net at the end. Among the fact that he's taking possession or he's all manipulated by the Nazi propaganda. So
Yeah. But one like I was saying before, like Summer Rental though, Richard Crenna in that he plays the villain and he does a really good job playing the villain in that. But usually like I mean, he's pretty good in Rambo too. He's pretty memorable, especially
mm,
in the later ones because he's a larger character. But the first one they kind of call him in to try to help subdue Sylvester Stallone's character. But he's got a very strong presence. Just him being there, even though he doesn't necessarily like go above and beyond, like you're saying, or try to do anything
hmm
different with the character other than what the script's telling him to do. He does have like a strong presence. It's like you see him, you're like, okay, that's a movie star right there in the film.
Yeah, no, he does the exact same thing in Leviathan. He's the Doctor Leviathan, and he has a
Yeah.
strong presence, even though he's not in the whole movie. I think he dies halfway through that movie too. But
It's more like it's near closer to the end actually. It does seem like earlier. It's probably like three-quarters of the way through, but
see,
yeah.
I haven't seen that one in a while. But we're talking about aquatic horror, so hopefully we'll
Yeah,
get
yeah,
around to
yeah.
that one.
But yeah, yeah, surprise. Yeah, I remember like I thought he died earlier too, but it's actually pretty close to the end. And after he gets infected, he's still on screen for a little bit longer because he starts to become a monster and stuff.
Hmm.
But he's kind of a villain a little bit in that. He's not quite a villain, but he
Mm-mm.
is kind of he's kind of set up as a character for the main character to kind of butt heads with. He's kind of butting heads with each other, kind of like he does in Summer Rental with John Candy's character.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's too bad we won't be talking about Summer Rental on this show, but we will be talking about a Leviathan at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Any other so we've gone through the whole plot of this film, thankfully. Because one of the things is I know there will be a lot of people who've never seen this film, and if they have heard of it, they may get it confused sometimes with Ghost Ship, which is very similar but different.
Right. And it's go. I mean, for some reason I thought Ghost Ship for a while. I thought it was a remake of this, but it's really not at all.
Mm.
It's not.
It's its
Um.
own thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm trying to get to some of the other great things about the film because we're talking about aquatic horror films, and that doesn't necessarily mean there has to be something out of the water, a monster in the water or something like that. We've kind of been avoiding all the shark movies, the typical aquatic horror, shark and alligator type things, and we're delving into something like this, which is kind of like a haunted house on water type of movie, and there's tons of movies like this out there. um but people kind of forget about these films, or they just haven't seen them. I mean, like
Yeah.
I said, Death Shift is not remembered by a lot of horror fans. It's kind of a cult movie.
Right.
I actually don't know if it was successful or not. I never looked that one up on this movie, to be
No,
honest with you.
I'll tell you. But it does have a. I mean, it doesn't have a 4K release. It has like a 2K scan, which looks surprisingly pretty good
Hmm.
when I watched it. But it's not like it hasn't even been kind of given a makeover. So I don't. It doesn't say what the budget is. It says it made 1.75 million, but it's in 1980. The budget looks pretty stout, really, with the
uh
set deck and the actors. So. I'm not sure how that relates to. It says the film was a box office disappointment, so I guess it didn't do as good as they thought it would. So
yeah.
it doesn't have the budget, but it looks like it has a decent sized budget.
Mm.
I think they should have spent more money on some of the special effects with the people getting killed. Like I feel like they didn't think that they needed that so much for some reason. They didn't like if they went a little more gruesome with some of the deaths, it may like stood out a little bit more, you know.
And
But then
well,
yeah,
that's one of the things I want to, one of the hard things to determine is because it was a 1980s movie, how far do you think it could have gone?
yeah,
I'm trying to remember the other 1980s movies that were successful, but
yeah.
there,
Like
I don't,
Halloween, for instance, so
I don't think there
78.
was,
Yeah,
yeah, 78, but I
yeah,
don't think there was a whole lot of aquatic horror movies, with the
right.
exception of, say, Jaws and Piranha, that really did well at the box office.
Yeah, as soon as I said that, I did think what you just said that it probably wasn't even in the cards. It was probably like if they tried to make it too gruesome, they probably would have gotten an NC-17 rating, and then they never would have gotten it played in any theater,
Mm.
other than like some theater nobody would watch it hardly.
Yeah, there wasn't that many successful low budget movies back then that were going to theaters not rated or
Yeah,
X. It's the 1980s, so I can't remember when X was
yeah,
still relevant.
right.
NC-17 didn't come until later.
Yeah,
Uh,
it probably was rated X, and it would have been, and then they would have to trim it down.
yeah,
So yeah, so
yeah.
it probably wouldn't have flown. They tried to go too good with it.
Well, all I can really say is that when I was a kid and I didn't recognize all the Nazi stuff because I wasn't really familiar with what World War II meant, I enjoyed the film mostly because of the actors in the film. And then, like I said, I'd forgotten about the movie. It wasn't one of those 80s movies that I've repeatedly gone back to and watched over and over again as I got older. It was something that was part of my childhood, and I kind of forgot about it, probably because it was not readily available either. Um, I don't actually have a good copy of the movie. I have everyone out there listening, when I say I have a bootleg, it's because there was no official release of this movie. It took a long. This was one of those films that just had not found a release on DVD or Blu-ray. And as Dave has said, you've got a 2K scan out there, and I forget who released it, but there's a 2K scan.
Scorpion releasing is
Scorpion
what it
release,
is.
and
Yeah.
it's not a film that was a Criterion release or what's it, the other major label?
But really, though, any like it's never going to get a Criterion release, but it could have gotten maybe a Shout Factory or an
Shout
Arrow
Factory. Thank you.
release, or even like Vinegar Syndrome. If they got hold of this thing, they could make a 4K, which they might. You never know.
You never
Vinegar
know.
Syndrome's taken like a lot worse films than this and put out a fantastic 4K releases of it.
It all depends on where the rights were held, and for a long time, I do know that the people were saying this was one of those cult films that people were asking for, but no one was putting out. And a lot of times when that happened in the early 2000s to 2000, the teens, the aughts, I guess is what you call them. It was one of those films where either you couldn't find a distributor that wanted it to upgrade it, or the rights were like buried between multiple different companies until someone decided to take the time to unbury the rights and get the rights.
Yeah, it's a lot to that stuff, and could be an issue too with the source material, like the original masters.
Yep.
Even though, like I said, it does look pretty good for only being a 2K scan. It says like 2K scan of the original interpositive of the longer cut with over 45 hours of color correction.
Jeez.
So, like when I was watching it, I thought it looked pretty good as far as that's concerned. I didn't see like a lot of real problems with it. I remember seeing the VHS cover at the video rental store, and I know there was a VHS version of this. I remember seeing the ship on the cover of it. It looked pretty cool.
Oh no, I definitely rented this because I don't remember having I remember having a dubbed copy from TV. So
yeah.
I definitely rented this when I was younger.
Right, yeah.
Whenever I was in the mood for a death ship, I'd probably rent this movie. And even after this, for a long time, there wasn't a whole bunch of movies that were like it. Like, I mean, when you think about the movies people remember from the 80s and 90s, there's not a whole lot of them that have to deal with haunted boats, haunted ships. Now there's a plethora of them. I mean, some of them are good, some of them are not so good.
Yeah.
But we are gifted with having even this movie with George Kennedy and Richard Crenna, among other great talents, or people who would go on to be great talents.
Yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's definitely George Kennedy and Richard Crenna in it. I don't know what like parallel universe you're living in right now.
And that's the thing is, when we talk about movies like this, we're kind of like, well, we saw this movie called Death Ship. I don't know if we could recommend it, but there's a movie called Death Ship. And you give them as much as you can to get them interested in maybe seeing it or avoiding it. But thankfully, this is not a film that you would completely avoid. It's got its problems, a lot of problems. But like we said, the actors do a sizable job of the film with what they're given, and it's more like a PG-13 horror film than what you might think or want in a R-rated horror film.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
So, any final thoughts on this film before we get to rating it?
Well, I was going to throw out just a couple other films that I thought had like a similar type of feel.
Oh,
to it.
yes.
Yeah. I got like I'm going to throw out two when we talked about the Blind Dead and the Ghost Ship, but one called this isn't a horror movie. You ever seen Triangle of Sadness?
I've not seen Triangle.
Yeah.
I thought you were about to say Triangle with Melissa George in it. No,
Yeah.
I've seen Triangle with Melissa George in it.
I was going to say Triangle's the other one I was going to say, but let's talk about Triangle first. Triangle's really great.
It's a really great movie.
Yeah, it's a very similar thing where they end up on a ship like that, but there's something. It actually takes the ideas that I was talking about earlier in this film about when I was watching this film, what I thought could happen, they actually take those ideas and they really throw those on their head about time loops and
Hmm.
possibly being in purgatory and things of that nature. They do a great job with it. Triangle of Sadness is a film that Woody Harrelson plays the captain in that one, and he's not like in it a lot. It's such a like a foreign film. I don't remember what nationality it is, but it's about a group of people on a ship that ends up crashing, and most of the people die and end up on an island after that. But it's really bizarre. But there's actually a scene in the middle when they all get seasick, and it goes on for almost 5 minutes with everybody puking, like over the top puking. And it's like the director kind of says he regrets that scene now because he thinks it's like a little much. But it's like he just went so extreme with it. It was just like because Woody Harrelson's character is kind of immune to it. Everybody else gets sick, and him and one other guy are not sick, but he gets like he's completely drunk, and him and this other guy are talking for a while. But I don't know. I just
Okay.
thought I'd throw that out there because it kind of reminded me just 'cause that it's on a ship like that, and
Oh my God.
plus it's called Triangle, and then there's another movie called Triangle that's almost like it's got like the kind of ideas this kind of sets up a little bit.
Hmm.
So, but the Triangle
No,
I
I
think
would.
is underseen too. I think that's an underseen film. This is from 2009.
What?
It's that a Triangle's from 2009, but it's an underseen film, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. When people talk about and even when I was doing some research on aquatic horror films, Triangle's up on the list.
Yeah.
But people agree that it's an underseen film, and even me, when I saw it, when I saw it on video, I only saw it because Melissa George was in it, and if she wasn't in it, I may have passed right by it until I've read more about it. Now
Right.
I've read several articles highlighting Triangle as the unseen or missed a film that was bad marketing in the time it came out, and a whole bunch of other reasons why it just did not click with audiences like it does now, which is I
Right.
agree with. Triangle of
I can't,
Sadness, I
yeah,
haven't heard
yeah.
that one.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it, but it is kind of interesting though. It's very interesting. It's very bizarre, but it's not a horror film. But this the Triangle though, I came across that one because I think Umbrella Entertainment was selling it. I think I was buying something else on their site, and I was like, that looks kind of cool, and I got it, and it was actually
Oh,
that was like the reason I saw. One other film, I don't know if you've seen this one. I haven't seen it. That it was it's called Below. You ever see that one?
is that the one with the haunted submarine
Yeah, yeah, it's the
by
Haunted
David
Submarine.
Thwahi? I think it's David Thwahi directed it. Yes,
Yeah, I hadn't
amazing
seen.
film.
Yeah, yeah, I hadn't seen that one. But it was on a list of things that they said were similar to Death Ship. You know.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good too. I had forgotten about Below. And another underseen movie. Because I don't think it did well at the box office. I may have been the only person in the theater who saw it.
Yeah, I think Shout Factory has a 4K out of that film.
Oh,
And it was funny because I was like, I saw it and I was like thinking about getting it, and I read a review, and it was like whoever wrote the review didn't seem like they cared for it much, and I was like, I guess I'll just wait. I might not get it till it goes on sale or something. You know, it's like,
no. I think it like most aquatic horror films when they are released theatrically, they are not seen with a very high hopes or expectations. I think unless, like I said before, unless it has a shark or a freaking alligator, those type of movies tend to get overlooked, and it's so sad they do because there are some gems in there. There are a lot of great gems in there. Death Ship isn't necessarily a gem. It might be more like a rhinestone of some type, or I don't know. It needs to be polished a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
But those are some of my final thoughts on this. Dave has added a lot of other movies you can watch with similar background to this. But I won't say that this is a film that you should avoid, that you shouldn't watch. If you want to watch a haunted house movie that's on a ship, this is not a bad one to do as long as you go in knowing that there are there are some connecting the dot issues in terms of the story. It doesn't, it won't elevate this film to being great, but there are a lot of movies from the 80s that we've seen that aren't great. They're not memorable, but we've seen them and we watch them every once in a while, but we're not going to go out there and tell everyone that they have to go see these movies. I thought it was an interesting film when I was a kid, when I didn't understand half the crap that was in it. I don't know. I'll
Yeah.
admit I didn't understand half that stuff that was in it when I was a kid. 100% did not
You're
understand.
right. Yeah, yeah. I wasn't even a kid when I saw it. I don't remember. I was probably like maybe in early high school or middle school or something. But I think some of it may have went over my head though. I was looking for more of a slasher film, I'm sure, you know.
I won't be surprised if I was doing the same thing.
Yeah,
Slashers were big then, and I loved slashers growing up. Watched
yeah,
them all, dude. I was a huge slasher fan. So that being said, we're gonna rate the film now. Between 1 and 5 stars, 1 being horrible, 5 being amazing. Where on the scale would you place Death Ship?
So I'm gonna say 2.5 stars. So that's probably where I landed. I think it's got a lot of merit to it as far as casting and location. The production values are really good. There's something lacking with the actual script a little bit, I think, but it's pretty close to being. It could have been elevated a little bit higher, but something's missing from it. It's not quite there. But there is some good stuff in there, though.
Yeah. I'm actually going to rate it only 2 stars. I did not enjoy it when I rewatched it as much as I used to watch it because
Yeah,
I'm grown up now and I can actually understand all the story elements. Although I understand and like the Nazi story elements, I hate the stupid the shots of the like it's trying to tell you the future events. They're all throughout the whole film. That's annoying to me
yeah,
now. I was watching those this time and those just annoyed me because
and
they weren't
yeah.
flashbacks by the character with knowledge the characters had, or flashbacks or flash forwards, and that just took me out. I just really did not like those. So I went from a higher grade to 2 for this film. So
Yeah, yeah, I've kind of feel that same way though about how I used to think it was a better film. I didn't think it was ever think it was a great film, but I definitely would thought it was a better film when I saw it when I was younger. And a lot of times when I see the films I saw when I was younger, I still like them. But it's not that I don't like it, but there's something lacking, and that's so bizarre what you're saying about those clips because they're really annoying when you see them because because you see it and you're like you just spoiled a scene because we know that scene's going to happen, you know,
yeah.
or you see it and you're like, I hope that doesn't happen because that looks like I don't really want to see that, you know.
Yeah, I get the same impression. I like when I was a kid, none of that stuff, all that stuff went over my head. As a grown up, and I've seen so many films compared to the 80s when I was growing up. I've seen so many more films. I've seen so many more aquatic horror films. I've seen so many films that get that right. That this
Yeah,
one, going back to watching this one, is not nearly as enjoyable. Um, and I know that if someone's watching it for the first time now, they probably would think it's a horrible movie. They would think it's slow. They would think all these things that we didn't think back then when the movie came out, because modern audiences have a greater reference for other similar films. So,
right, right.
so Dave, I want to thank you for joining me on this conversation in horror in which we talked about Death Ship. For everyone out there, I hope that you've enjoyed this film and the other movies that we've been discussing for our aquatic horror month. Make sure to check out all of the other films we talked about this month and continue to talk about for the rest of this month. You can also, oh well, actually, you can find this on all your major podcast apps, Spotify and YouTube, as well as direct on Lisbon, our home site. Also, make sure to check out our sister podcast, Conversations in Four Color, which delves deep into comic books, manga, and graphic novels. That is our Patreon supported web podcast only. So you have to be a supporter of the Patreon page in order to access that one. But we hope that you will. From all of us at Something Wicked Entertainment, we hope you have a pleasant day, and don't forget to come back for our regular episodes every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Thank you so much, and have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.